we've inherited a power relatively pretty quickly because of the mainstream media. There's so many gates that we can talk about. I know this is some Republicans in here, some Democrats in here, so I'm not gonna go into the specific examples of it. But we've inherited power overnight because of that. And that's a lot of responsibility, because it gives me the power to debunk something so simple as that article that my best friend showed me with a quick 1 or 2 minute video that I can post on Instagram. But the other side of that is the Tucker Carlson, who can tell his audience that Chabad is this terrible, terrible Jewish whatever, right? That's the problem and the balance that we're trying to work here with.
Caleb, what's your take? Do you think that citizen journalism can be an answer to the bias that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think it can. I don't think we actually had much trust in mainstream media before October 7th. I think after it probably diminished any trust we had left. But what I'll say is, when you see mainstream media networks who are adhering to terrorist organizations and the Gaza Health Ministry for data and information, and using that as factual information for their headlines, I mean, like, what the hell? Like, seriously, you know? So I think that when we, as independent journalists, we can actually chase objectivity and truth, and that's what I think we're missing. I think everyone in this room, actually, over the last 3 years, has had a chance to share the truth, or whatever this place is called, Voices for the Truth. There you go. So that's what we've been able to do over the last 3 years.
Nate?
Same question.
Same question.
I don't know, I think like trust, you can kind of weigh it by the difference in views that your audience has. So sometimes people will walk up to me in New York and say, like, I disagree with everything you're doing besides the Palestine protest stuff, the exposing paid protesters, like, and I think that's cool that they watch. That's awesome, because then you have people who have open minds that watch, and you can actually say, oh, I changed their mind on something. That's neat. And how many Republicans watch CNN? How many Democrats watch Fox? So I think that's where citizen journalists can come in.
It does remove some of the partisan bias, I think, absolutely. Isabella, what's your take?
Well, first of all, I think we can't avoid bias. And another thing that I agreed with here is that mainstream media has not been great before October 7th and also after. Emily, I've been seeing your work since I'm in high school. You know this, we know this. It's not new, but what is new is how bad the cultural problem has gotten. And I would like to see citizen journalists focus on addressing that issue. I think the issue that we should be focusing on now is not just the bias, but how can we correct that bias via promoting an offensive, narrative, changing the culture, shifting the culture. Some of the most meaningful work that I've done was working with, I feel like it's close, was working with honest reporting. And I can tell you from before October 7th, the media has not been great, but each one has a different role. So honest reporting will address the biases, is here to ensure the integrity, and I want to see more of a shift when it comes to answering the problem of the cultural issue.
Now, I want to ask all of you, I mean, you're all working in very hostile online environments, actually, all of us are. What has been the personal cost to each of you when it comes to doing this publicly? I'll start with you, Nate.
I'm glad I wasn't going first.
Switching it up.
I don't think there's been any personal cost. People say that like they've sacrificed something. I love what I do. Every single day I love going out there. And I think it's a privilege to go out there. So if anyone was my friend, like stopped being friends with me after October 7th, whatever, they were never my friends to begin with. So yeah, that's it.
Caleb?
Yeah, as Nate just said there, I believe that anyone or anything lost in the pursuit of truth is a blessing in disguise. They never were really meant to be in your life anyway. Real quick, by show of hands here, I'm just curious, if you have received threats because of being Jewish, there you go, because of being Jewish, or by supporting and defending Jewish people, I want you to raise your hand. Let's see here. Yeah, see, it's the entire room, right? It's not just us, it's the entire freaking room, right? This is, and the threats, they're rough. The one thing that really gets to me is I was back in my hometown a few weeks ago and met up with some of my friends that I grew up with. And these are people that I had spent so many years with through my life, and I thought were like good friends of mine. I go back there, we hang out, go to get some food somewhere, and the one insult that really bothered me, it's not the good goy, it's not plus 7K, I don't mind that, but it's the one insult that bothered me was Jew lover. I heard that a lot. Jew lover, like seriously, my question to them would be, if being a Jew lover is seen as weird or abnormal or not acceptable among the youth, then what the fuck are you? Like a Jew hater? That's what's becoming trending among the youth? That's what we're adhering to? So, and I'll say this. If standing up for a minority that is persecuted simply for existing leads to any suffering of my own, then so be it. I'm fine with that.
Isabella, what about you? The personal or professional cost of doing what you do publicly?
So I'm excited to answer this question because I'm in a room full of influencers. Usually when I'm asked this question, it's to the community, and I wouldn't say I'm not honest, but I wouldn't emphasize the negative parts. I just passed the bar exam, thank God. Thank you, Hashem. And 2 weeks I'll be a lawyer, and I have to say that being a lawyer, being in a law firm, and applying for jobs, and being a very active activist on the street, perhaps is not the most appealing thing to a law firm. However, when it comes to other spaces, if I was an environmental activist, that would be great. But I want to point out something very interesting in an experience that I've had, is that when I was applying to firms, I had no discrimination from non-Jewish people. It was Jewish people who had told me, and observant people who would say, maybe it's not good for our bottom line, I'm not sure, you have a great, resume, why don't you work for Big Law, why don't you do this? I'm like, no, I want to work here, I like the environment, like I'll get back to you. And I've had people tell me, you should maybe tone it down, you should dial it back. After October 7th, some of those people actually reached out to me to apologize, so I appreciate that. That was a big deal. But ultimately, I agree with what you guys said here. A place that does not value what I do and what we should be doing, and I'm not saying we all have to do it the same way, but we all have to use our talents to fight for emet, to fight for truth, is not somewhere I want to be. So it has allowed me to be more in alignment, living in my truth.
All right, now it's all up to you.
There we go again. My intro to politics was conspiracy theories. I was deep, deep in that rabbit hole. I actually recommend a lot of people that are opposed to what we say to go deeper into that rabbit hole, because eventually you'll come to a fork in the road where do you continue to listen to the people that lie to you because it's entertaining and fun, or do you come out of it and marry the truth? And I married the truth. It's a pretty good marriage, actually. There's some consequences with it, unlike other marriages. But since I made that commitment to the truth and to not be embarrassed again, I don't care what the consequences are. If I see Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens parroting whatever crazy narrative there is, it is my duty, it's our mission as content creators, as influencers, to debunk that with objectivity, something that people can go and look for themselves. As Fabian Garcia and I always say, show them the receipts, pull the receipts out. But the consequences that obviously come with that are all the comments that we see, are all the death threats that we get. I'm sure everybody has gotten them here, right? It's stapled on my head that I'm Jewish, so imagine the commentary that I get all the time. But who cares? If the cost of it is online attacks, someone doxing you, it's way better than living in a world and in a society where the majority of people believe these conspiracy theories or these narratives. So it doesn't matter what the consequences. Ask the IDF soldiers in Gaza what the consequences are. Yeah.
Or the consequences are much scarier in an alternative world where we accept it. Like if you hide Megan David, accepting that reality is the consequence that I think is scarier too. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to say, you guys are very resilient, very. The entire panel is like, I don't give a fuck. But I guess that's because of where we are, Voices for Truth, I want to ask you, we know now, all of us know, that the majority of Gen Z are getting their news from social media platforms, which has pluses and has minuses. But what that means is that many content creators are the news. They're the ones who shape political narratives, and we see those narratives being shaped across social media on a variety of issues that seem to come up almost every single day. I want to ask each of you, do you have an example of a time when the narrative has been constructed incorrectly as a result of social media, and how did you respond? We'll start with you, David, or you want a break?
I'll take a break. No, I'm kidding. But I do gotta think about this, so I'll filibuster a little bit. Tucker Carlson, though, is a great example of that, because every time that he tweets something, I feel like it's a knee-jerk reaction to whatever happened out there. And there's a lot of people that do this. I know we know a lot of content creators that post that stuff, because if you're the first one or the second one to post it, it's likely to go viral. I mean, I've been a victim of this. There's plenty of, not plenty for me, but there's examples of where I saw something, I thought that I'm reporting the objective facts of it, but it just happened. It was maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes ago. And within a few hours, there's obviously updates. There's more information that's pouring in. So I asked myself, do I want to be the first one to break the story? Am I a news account? No, I'm a political commentator. I go to the streets and debate people. That's what I like to do. And everything that I do is rooted in objectivity. So I will prioritize the objectivity to report on something 24 or 48 hours later, than mislead people and be known as that guy that he constantly pushes narratives first or breaks the stories, but they're not true. Do I trust him? And that's a big thing for me. I think a big thing for all of us, right, is trust. Do our audience and the people who are coming across your page for the first time, can they actually trust you? If you lie to me once, okay. But if you continuously do it, I lose all trust in you. So I think that could be the solution to the Gen Z problem, is prioritize the objectivity, which they won't, unfortunately, because monetization is great. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of stuck.
Caleb?
In order to properly answer this question, I'm going to give some context. I've never actually said this publicly, but I'll say it now. I haven't always been pro-Israel. There's a period in my life a couple years ago where I thought Zionism was evil. I thought that I fell for the conspiracy. I thought Jews controlled the finances of America. I fell for all this crap, and I was the 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid that was in a high school classroom, scrolling on TikTok and seeing these conspiracies, and I'll be fully vulnerable. I fell for a lot of that. So I understand this on a very personal level because I was in that position less than 2 years ago. But the thing for me that really shocked me out of that was I had seen the claims of the apartheid in Israel, and this was during the war, so all the genocide claims. So I go over there with some family, and I go over there, I'm like, holy cow. Like, I walk around the Muslim quarter, and I speak to Arabs, and they love Jews. They love Israel. I go to the Jewish quarter, I walk around with a cross on my neck. Nobody spits on me. Everyone's nice. Everyone's welcoming. It's actually the Jews were the most welcoming country, or Israel was the most welcoming country to me I've ever been to in my life. So really, the whole narrative and social media that I had fallen for, the propaganda, was completely debunked just in that visit. So.
Nate, what about you?
I don't think I've ever gone out on the street with the sole intention of debunking, but a lot of the time, after I do a report, a mainstream report will come out and I'll be like, that's not true because I've seen it. So one of them is I don't know if you guys remember when the migrant crisis was at its worst, 2023, all the pictures on CNN were women and children coming over. And it's I've been outside the migrant shelters in New York and it's just North African single men. I'm like, okay. So I interviewed them, and Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, congressman, is they're not getting Medicare, Medicaid. And I'm like, yeah, they've told me they're getting that. So that's happened many times, but that's probably the best example of how they've just lied to us, and then CNN says it's true because the congressman said it.
Isabella, what about you?
So I want to give two examples. My goal online is not to post first. I really want to shift the narrative and shift the culture. That's something that really, really speaks to me. The first example I'll give is one that's a pro-Palestine one, and one that we can do ourselves to shift the narrative a little bit more, minutely to, change the narrative. So the first one, we all remember the Al-Ahli hospital, and then when we found out that it was the PIJ that shot it down, the news quickly dropped the story, and it was not a thing anymore. So when I would correct that, that was something that was flagrant, that I felt the need to have proof on my profile. It was at the peak, of all the action. It was important for me to have all the primary sources to show why that was wrong. But above that, above correcting the headline and promoting integrity, I want to shift the culture by saying, if you are pro-Palestinian or if you are Palestinian, do you realize that this story was dropped the moment Israel was not involved? These people don't actually care about you. So my goal is to change the intuition of people when they see the news, to add that. So maybe that's not the most objective thing to put in a post, but that's what I care about. And the second one is something that we can do, because we often speak to ourselves and we know what we're saying. But when we go out, not everyone really gets the depth. So last week, or what was it, 2 weeks ago, I was at a pro-Palestine counter-protest. And I got into a debate with a pro-Palestinian man. He was masked. And he had told me, you guys have Israel because of the Holocaust. Israel's born out of the Holocaust. And I said, hold up. We often say we need Israel to be safe. We need Israel because if we didn't have Israel, there would be a Holocaust. Yeah, that's true. Israel is a safe place for us. However, it's omitting a very important, deeper truth, that our rights to Israel is not because of the Holocaust. Our rights to Israel is not because of anti-Semitism. So when we explain ourselves, or when we explain our rights through the lens of because we were, oppressed throughout the generations, then we have the right to Israel, it harms the narrative in a way that we don't realize, because no, even if there was no anti-Semitism in the world, we still have the right to be in Israel. And this is important because let's say there was an American who's not that involved. They'll think, hey, it's okay to be a Jew in America. It's chill. So why do they need Israel? So that's why I really care about, that's one example of how I think we can shift the narrative and shape it in a way that will promote our rights in a more emet and more truth way, voices for truth.
I just want to add a few comments here as someone who works in the new media space and the traditional media space, and that is that you touched on something interesting about objectivity. I don't actually believe in objectivity. I think if we look at what happens in the newsrooms right now, it's very clear that there is no objectivity on that front. I myself don't strive to be objective. Of course, I have my own views. I strive to be factual. And I strive to put things in context. And I think that we can't really ask for much more from journalists today, because everyone has a bias. Everyone has a bias. And it's important to not pretend that that's not the case. We need to acknowledge it and put things in context, whatever that bias may be, including my own biases. But in regards to the narratives, the false narratives being shaped, I just want to add a few comments about what we saw last week with the New York Times, because I think this is a very distinct example, and a particularly pernicious one, that shows how the mainstream media is crafting a completely false narrative. And in fact, it's actually one that's picked up from some of the new media activists, the Max Blumenthal types, with this absurd dog rape nonsense. And as a journalist myself, I felt very compelled to speak out against this, because the way they crafted this article was intentionally deceitful. It was entirely journalistically awful. It didn't stand up to any standard, despite the fact it's the New York Times. And I think that the way we saw not only myself, but most of the people in this room speak about that immediately in response, organizing protests. I know End Jew Hatred held a protest outside the New York Times. Several hundred people showed up like the next day. This is what I believe we need to be doing when media gets it so, I would say, criminally wrong with defamation of an entire country. And it's really obscene what's been allowed to happen in the mainstream media. So I believe, as a journalist myself, that citizen journalism is incredibly important on this front. But I do want to ask you, as a final question for all of you, what is one thing that you think audiences should do to become better consumers of information that we see on social media and mainstream media in the current environment? We'll start with you, David.
Again.
No breaks for you.
No breaks out. Nah, I had 3 people, and you went on for a minute there. I like it.
I told you I wanted those 2 minutes.
I'll buy some more time. What was that question again? No, I'm kidding. I don't know, honestly, if I'm going to be very transparent with everyone here. I don't know what it is that I can recommend to the audience, because it's your own journey. I think about myself before I became a content creator, before I even ever thought about picking up the phone and taking a selfie, which is not really a selfie, but just think about yourself, how you got in here in the first place. To me, it was those conspiracy theories and being embarrassed when I tell all my best friends that, martial law is gonna happen, and it goes on for a month and 2 months and 3 months and nothing happens. That's really embarrassing. When you have like a tin hat foil on and you're like, we're building bunkers, right, guys? You guys got your canned food, right? That is embarrassing. So for whoever that might be, if your best friend just doesn't believe in all of the factual evidence, not objective, that you put out there, just continue to let them go down that rabbit hole, because eventually it'll be so embarrassing. Eventually they'll have no friends at all, that they'll have to confront themselves in this fork. Do I continue to go down this very dark rabbit hole, or do I come up to the light, get a fresh breath, essentially? So that's my recommendation.
So FAFO. FAFO, basically.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
What about you?
Well summarized.
Yes.
Yeah, this isn't feasible for everyone here, but I would say 3 words. That is, see for yourself. And what that means, there was recently a city called Lakewood, New Jersey. I'm sure a lot of you guys know what that is. It was in the headlines for being a racist enclave of Jews. Yeah, and I could have formed an opinion on that based off of what media outlets are posting or the TikToks I saw, but I decided I'm gonna go there and speak to the Latinos and speak to the black people that live there. And I didn't encounter one person in that community who had anything negative to say about the Jews, not a single person. So oftentimes, we're so quick to form an opinion based off a biased media outlet or a social media account, but if we can actually, I know it's not possible, it takes, we have families and stuff, right? We have financial issues, whatever, but to actually experience something in person and form your own opinions that way is, you can't beat that, So.
Can you ask the question one more time?
Yes, the question was about what audiences can do to better inform themselves and be more educated in terms of what they're seeing, both from mainstream media and from social media.
Okay. I guess it depends on your goal as the audience. Like, if you were trying, I think most of this room leans right, but whatever. Let's say you want to have a balanced view. You should probably watch 2 different viewpoints. Like, if you go and watch, I don't know who's on the right anymore. Everyone's like moving around. But whatever.
What is the right?
Yeah. Choose someone on the right and then watch someone on the left. And then chances are you actually have a nuanced view of things and you don't just have a right or left opinion. Like, it's sometimes nuanced. So trust the nuance that you have. It's okay to have nuance in your opinions.
And Isabella.
I really like what you said, Emily, about the facts and the context. You honestly put it succinctly of how I approach it without realizing it, so I really like what you said about that. But the advice that I would have is 2 parts. So the first thing would be to diversify your sources, like you guys mentioned, and to touch on the context. So in Hebrew, we believe Hebrew is also a language that creates and builds. It's a little bit different than English. I like to think about it as emet. Emet is truth. Emet is spelled with the first letter aleph, the middle letter mem, and the last letter tet. So you only know the truth once you know the beginning, the middle, and the end. So that's what I would say. So focus on everything. Don't look at something out of context, and focus on the emet. And the second thing that I want to touch on, which you touched on, Aid, is the left or right. Check your bias. And I want to share a story quickly. About 2 years ago, when there was the encampments at McGill, I went to counter-protest, have conversation, bring about dialogue, and I was kicked off with some other Jews. Of course, that's no surprise. It was violent. We went for peacefully, and the police effectively acted as the encampment's private security. That was very frustrating. And the biggest mainstream media in Quebec, in Montreal, is TVA Nouvelle. And one of the reporters had come up to me saying, "Oh, what happened?" I explained it to him. He said, "Wow, that's so awful. They took you out violently." I'm like, "Yeah, it sucks." And he was like, "You know what, can I interview you?" I said, "Sure." And he looked really empathetic. 5 minutes later, I'm a little roughed up. He comes to me, shoves the microphone in my face, goes, "Pourquoi tu t'es forcé? Why did you force yourself into the encampment? And you just went there aggressively." I was like, "Oh, so it'd be like that, okay." And this is, but to remember that it really do be like that. And this is supposed to be a mainstream, right-leaning media outlet. And I quickly said, no, and we went on. But that was a moment where I said, wow, I watched this news at home. I would have not thought that journalists were, that it'd be like that. I did not think that it was like that, to put it nicely. So I guess my broader point here is that when we focus our efforts, it's important for us to not put all our eggs in one basket. You know, the right or the left can sour on us at any moment. And of course, now it's looking better on the right, but keep in mind that the only way to really, fight for ourselves is to fight for ourselves and to look at the objectivity. So I really wanted to emphasize that, because that was a moment where I was like, again, it'd be like that.
Well, I think all of you do incredible work in your own voices, and you all have a very, very important role to play in the spread of information, in actually news, whether or not you realize it. And I just want to emphasize in closing for the audience that everyone here actually has an element of citizen journalism in what they're doing. You have different approaches, you have different skills, you have different audiences. All of that is needed in this struggle. And I want to encourage all of you to follow, first of all, everyone here, to track what they do, to look at the stories that they're reporting, and to try to build your own stories as well. I mean, you have the ability to do this in what we're talking about and the issues that we're facing, and more than ever before, you have an opportunity to be really a citizen journalist and to put out the correct information and the full context of stories, and to push back when we see bias or when we see journalists who aren't doing their job. So I want to encourage all of you, in addition to this, the panel here and the incredible work that they have been doing and are doing, to join that fight and to continue doing what they're doing and use their example as something that we can learn from and that we can emulate. And with that, we close.